Hi, everyone. Um, Firstly, apologies for the glitch. Technical glitch we faced happens to the best of us. Happened to Ola Electric yesterday, so I think mine is a lot less in that sense. But anyway, so thanks for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Ford, which has just finally and officially announced that it will be shutting its manufacturing operations in India. Now, this is really a big deal because Ford, it came one of the first manufacturers to come to India in around 95, 96. The first car they did was the Ford Escort, which was more of a CKD car with Mahindra, their first joint venture partner, and we'll come to that later, almost their second. And then they started off with the Ford Icon, which was really their first made in India car. And that car was special for us because actually, with that car, we launched Autocar India. It was a world exclusive on the first issue of Autocar India in September 99. So, in a way, very special for us at Autocar as well. And since then, Ford has had a bit of a difficult ride because if you look at it after 25 years, what have they got to show? A minuscule less than 2% market share and $2 billion of losses. Now, that really is, after a quarter of a century, obviously someone somewhere is going to say, hey, are we going to keep throwing, good money into a market where we can't make any money? And I think what we're going to talk about is really what precipitated Ford's, exit in terms of manufacturing. Now, Ford is saying that they will continue as a brand in India. Of course, they're going to be continuing with certain imports. How those imports are going to be doing that, again, we'll come to later. But let's just talk about the Ford story. So clearly, Ford has had a long history in India. Ford's actually had some really big moments. The Icon was a big moment, which it had. It kind of established Ford as a brand. And when it sold, it was really one of the best sellers in its class. Really a car tailored for India. Anyone who drove it will really love the Icon because it was a great car to drive. One of the nicest cars to drive. The fantastic row-cam engine, 1.6 row-cam engine. And it was very, very affordable as well. Then after that, Ford has had a string of products, so not too many products. I mean, it had the next generation Fiesta. Then they brought in the Endeavor at that point. They tried with the Fusion. Fusion was a bit of a flop, a bit too early for its time. And then the next big moment for Ford really was the Ford Figo, which again was the way Ford should be making cars. They took a legacy platform which worked well, a really low-cost car for India, but they kind of made it stick because it was cheap to buy and even cheap to own. Ford at that time with the Figo started its whole concept of really giving, service which was low. But somehow the Ford brand really didn't take off. Again, issues with certain dealers, legacy dealers, which really didn't deliver on the promise which Ford had got. And then moving forward, the next big blockbuster was the EcoSport. It was shown at the Auto Expo in 2012 in Delhi and then came on the roads in 2013. And the EcoSport really has been the best-selling Ford for Ford India and really the halo car in many ways. And any one of us who's driven a EcoSport really love it. It was our car of the year, as was the Figo actually. So really, you had some really special Fords over here. And it's really a shame that they couldn't make the most of it. So really, what is the problem? I think the fundamental problem is that it is a cultural disconnect between American companies like Ford and India. Now, the thing about Ford is that they do things in a certain way in which are very, very high cost. In fact, they spend where the customers can't see it. I mean, even the Sanand plant, quite frankly, they've made a Taj Mahal out of it. I mean, you don't need a plant which has to take some crazy, Gale Force 5 hurricane standard just because that's the way it is built in US. You don't have to have forklifts which cost 7-8 times more than what it could normally cost just because of that last 1% in health and safety which they want. So Ford were building a plant in India to global standards. And what happened is with that cost, they needed about 100,000 cars to really break even in a market like with a plant like Sanand. And of course, that never happened. Of course, when they came in, projections of the Indian market were very high. It was going to zoom to 7 million. That's what even Ford wanted, but it didn't happen. So obviously, combination of a lot of factors that Sanand really was finally a millstone round their neck, because at Marai Malai Nagar they were making cars profitably. Endeavor, very very profitable car. Sad that that's gone. But Endeavor was a car that had 30% of the overall. India was 30% of the Endeavor market. So really, to give that away must have been very very painful for Ford, because the Endeavor has stopped and will also not be produced in India. But again, with Sanand, again, was that cost structure, and that's where it started getting a little pear shaped. And then around 2017, Ford had to make a decision. What do we do? We can't stick around alone. They just didn't have the scale. Now, the auto business, it's all about scale. I mean, you need a lot of volume to really make it work. And the way to do it is either you have the products that do it, which clearly they didn't, or you have the market that grows to that sense, and you grow with the market. Again, the market wasn't growing, and the only other way was to partner up. Now, they had a certain choice of partners. They could have even gone with Chang'an, which is their Chinese partner, but then they chose to tango with Mahindra. Now, honestly, it wasn't such a bad idea, because if you look at it, the synergies were fantastic. They had a relationship with Mahindra, and actually the partnership on paper looked really, really good. So basically, the partnership is they would both develop a range of SUVs. In fact, about 7 SUVs were planned between both these companies. So that's quite a lot. And with that in mind, is what Ford went forward. But I think Ford, what it did is it passed certain gateways basically on a handshake. And finally, when the joint venture fell through for a variety of reasons, now everyone's got their story. Ford have got their stories. They basically feel that Mahindra really pulled the plug on them at the last minute, and they had no choice but to pack up. Whereas Mahindra also have their side of the story. There were kind of differences on indemnities, on certain royalty issues, on certain transaction prices between Ford India and the rest of the Ford universe, which wasn't being shared. All kinds of issues. So I've been talking to some of these guys off the record, but whatever it is, the fact is that the partnership fell apart, and a proposed joint venture which Ford was banking on didn't come. And fundamentally, that is the problem why Ford has exited, because it did not have a plan B. It's not that it's not that they didn't have the money. They had already committed to a certain amount of investment in the joint venture. It's not that they didn't have a plan. In fact, India was to be a very important base to export cars to the IMG group, which is the international market group for Ford, which is about 100 countries. So Ford was going to use India to export to 100 countries. So again, Ford was really desperate to stick in India. Unlike what people think that they've up sticks and gone, they were desperate to stay in India just for this, but they couldn't stay alone. The business economics just didn't work out. More important is that they had no product pipeline, because what they were banking on with the Mahindra joint venture, that had all gone. They had to start with a clean sheet of paper. And when they did that, it would take at least 3 years for the next new product to come. And there's no way they could have continued operating two plants, which are, as it is, running about 20-25% capacity with this aging product lineup. And don't forget, in the next couple of years, there are going to be emission regulation changes. So again, there's going to be investment required for that. Then, of course, the thought was, should they be investing so much at a time when electrification is coming? So the whole timing of it really wasn't, it just didn't work out. So Ford went and knocked on a lot of doors of a lot of OEMs. They spoke to MG. MG, of course, I think it was not possible with them. Halol is already full up. They don't have plans immediately for another plant. Tata would have been a great fit, actually, because what Tata needs is a 4.2, 4.3 meter SUV, which it doesn't have right now. And it would have an SUV that slots between the Nexon and the Harrier. Ford had that. What is the B772? It was to be joint with Mahindra, but that was fundamentally a Ford platform. But again, things didn't work out with Tata Motors as well. Citroen, again, had their own plans. They even spoke to Ola Electric, but for with them setting up a 1 million capacity plant for scooters, obviously they were in no need of capacity. So literally they knocked at every door, desperate for an alliance or a partnership so that they could stick on. And I think that's really the important point. So, but in the absence of that, they've had no choice but to shut shop, which is really a shame. And what a shame. And what I'm really sad about is even something like the Endeavor, which really is a low cost operation. It's an assembly operation, doesn't require too much infrastructure. It doesn't require too big a plant. Even that was, they were unable to continue just because the cost of just running that alone, the business sense, the business case wasn't there at all. So even the Endeavor has gone, and Ford have announced that they're going to seize all local product manufacturing. So even the EcoSport, which we've seen a lot of spy shots of, and that was due for an imminent launch, that also has now been axed. It is cancelled. The 2021 EcoSport is not going to be coming to a showroom near you. And honestly, the EcoSport had a lot going for it, because earlier the plan was to use Mahindra's 1.2 turbo petrol, but when that fell through, they were going to continue with the 1.5 Dragon. And then what we found is that the launch, which was in April, that was getting pushed and pushed. So early signs that Ford were really, in exit mode, because there's no point launching an EcoSport if they're getting out. But then you will ask, why did they launch, the Figo automatic? Well, the truth is they had around 250 kits of the automatic and just put that into the market. As it is, that car was to be launched a lot earlier, but the pandemic delayed it. So that's how it was. And going forward, I think Ford is, they say they're going to be here in India. They're going to be doing business in India, but it's going to be very, very challenging, because quite frankly, for a mass brand to survive on imports where the duties are astronomical is going to be quite challenging. We know they've sold the Mustang again in very limited volumes. They've just announced that they're going to bring the Mustang Mach-E, the all-electric Mustang. That would be interesting. There's going to be bringing the Ranger Wildtrak, which we've written about in Autocar India, and a couple of more CBUs or imports which there are. But again, those would just amount to a handful. So again, it will be very difficult to sustain the massive operation that Ford has right now. And clearly what we will see is that dealers in the smaller cities, they might be difficult to sustain their operations. They might survive just now on service, because there are 1 million Fords in the market. So that's quite a large vehicle park, and good service revenue for the dealerships. But clearly in terms of retail and sales, it might just shrink to a handful. And that's what's going to happen to Ford. Their footprint in India is going to shrink to something quite minuscule. But the point is, they are having a presence in India, however small, just to keep their foot in the door, because you never know in the future. This is a big market. It's not a profitable market. That's the whole issue. And that's, I think, what the big manufacturers have come to realize, that though India is this massive market, it's very, very difficult to make money over here. And only a handful of manufacturers really corner the market, which is Maruti and the Koreans. I mean, that's really, they're becoming stronger and stronger, while Suzuki are getting weaker and weaker, and some of them exiting, like we've seen with Ford. So really, that's really the story of Ford. Fundamentally, they've left because the business could just not be sustained, and they actually did try to stay on. The only way to sustain the business was to find a partner, was someone to share capacity, product development, that sort of thing. No company really showed interest, or the timing was bad, and so that's why they've had to shut shop as far as their plans go. Now, what I want to talk about is, what does this mean for existing Ford owners? Well, I just spoke to. We had an interaction with the MD, Anurag Mehrotra, and he said, or he assured all Ford owners, that spare parts will still continue to be available. That, don't forget that even if Ford has a shut operation, the spare parts are usually made by a lot of suppliers, but definitely some spares come from within Ford. So I don't know how that's going to pan out. But he has assured that spare parts will continue to be freely available, in his words, or quote, for the foreseeable future. And they will be at the same competitive price that Ford has been giving all along. So that's a reassurance he's giving existing Ford customers. But clearly, I think the other knock-on effect we're going to see is that when a manufacturer stops or ceases production, and all cars stop ceasing production, the resale values of the cars drop dramatically. So that is one issue. But the good thing is that the used car market is very hot right now because it's so hard to get a new car. Everyone's hanging onto their used cars. So those are in short supply, and this whole demand supply issue is pushing up the price of not only new cars but used cars as well. So thing is, hang on to the Fords right now. It's still early days. Service will continue. Even the plants are not going to be kind of wound down completely. They have got certain production export commitments. So until 2022, you are going to see production continuing for first quarter of 2022, and then until they wind down completely. Ford have also said that they will continue production of engines at the Sanand plant, but that's mainly for global markets. Don't forget, that's quite interesting. As everyone else is stopping IC engine production and development because they're going electric, markets like India or countries like India can be a great base for low cost, small displacement petrol engines, which is what Ford is banking on. And that's even actually what Stellantis is doing with these PSA and the Citroen brand. So again, just to kind of wrap it up and say that yes, Ford, after over 25 years of make in India cars, is finally going to stop that, stop producing cars in India. But again, they are going to be here with a very small presence with some small cars. How long that will continue, we don't know. But I think clearly Ford is categorical in saying that it's not upping sticks the way GM did and leaving people in the lurch. Of course, that remains to be seen how it pans out with the dealers. But I think one thing I will say is that anyone who's worked with Ford that know that they've got a certain value system and they are the nice guys. In fact, a lot of people say they've been too nice, and that has come at a certain cost, which has been reflected in their business case. And that's also, again, one of the reasons why they've not been really viable in India. So, again, to all Ford owners, is this a cause for concern? Well, any manufacturer who's, let's say, exiting the country in terms of production, or not making the cars you own anymore and has stopped production of it, obviously there will be some effects as much as manufacturers, give you reassurances. And anyway, with that, I'm happy to take some questions, which I will. Let me look at that. We've got one question saying that what will happen to service? Will service centers close? I don't think they will close immediately, because don't forget, service is a lot of revenue for dealerships. That's where they make a lot of revenue. So, and with such a large vehicle park, almost a million Fords sold since the beginning, I think service centers will continue, and that they are not going to shut down in a hurry. Another question is, wasn't the EcoSport facelift coming? Yes, it was coming. The launch was absolutely imminent. In fact, we were expecting it this month. But with this announcement, the EcoSport launch has been cancelled. There is no more EcoSport coming. Will the Bronco come to India? That's another question. Yes, there are plans to bring the Bronco to India. I think when there's an RHD version, it will definitely come. And I think that's one of the models that is slated to come to India. What happens to resale value? Good question. And I think I've answered this. I think resale value will take a hit purely because these cars have stopped being produced. And typically a car that's out of production takes a big hit on resale value. And more so when you know that the company, as far as a manufacturing operation, is also stopped. Is it advisable to buy a used Ford right now? Well, I think some of the Fords are really good. They're great to drive. Buying a used Ford is more about buying with the heart than the head, to be honest. But I think if you get a good used Ford, a great EcoSport in good shape. I mean, personally, I love the EcoBoost engine. That EcoSport was just absolutely brilliant. I would snap it up in a jiffy. And if you get a good price, because the resale value gets impacted because of all these announcements, I think it's definitely worth a buy. Another question is there any possibility of a partnership with any other maker? Well, I think it's too late now, because Ford has run out of time. It's had to take a call. It was bleeding a lot. And obviously, no car maker was interested in partnering with Ford. I think what will happen right now is all their assets will be up for grabs, and there will be manufacturers possibly looking at the plants, because Ford will be selling off the plants. And if they get that for a steal, don't be surprised if some of the existing OEMs who want a bit of capacity snap some up the plants. Uh, Another question is, what were the best Fords in India according to you? Well, a long list. I think Fords, they've made some of the best driving cars, cars which really put a smile on your face. And honestly, as I said, personally, I'm really sad Ford as a brand is going, because a company with, great products, great people, and great values as well. That's really what Ford stood for. And you ask any employee, they'll know that the Ford value system, their HR practices, really one of the best, a very, very humane company. But coming back to the great Fords, I think for me, it started off with the Icon, absolutely brilliant car. And for me, it kind of it sort of signified that golden age of motoring in the early 2000s, and that's really when autocar started also. I mean, it was really cheap, it was quick, it was a time when the road network started building, there were no speed limits, you were not encumbered by regulations, all that sort of thing. And it was cheap, fun, affordable motoring, and really put a smile on your face. And I think the other Fords, for me, after that, I even like the Fiesta, which was the B376, again because of the handling. I think Ford steerings have been one of the best, be it hydraulic or electric. And I think the EcoSport was another absolutely brilliant car, because it was based on a phenomenal chassis, which was the B2E chassis. Again, quite an expensive chassis. That is the problem, because Ford really um, banked on its European products, which, to be honest, were a bit too expensive for the Indian market. That's why even the next generation Fiesta, which had come, which was the B299, it flopped in India, because it really wasn't tailored for this market. And it was a European Fiesta bought over here, and it just didn't work. But again, coming back to the EcoSport, I think the EcoSport with the 1 liter EcoBoost engine, which I think is still today the best small capacity petrol engine I've ever driven. It's won a lot of awards, including International Engine of the Year award multiple times, on which I'm a juror. And just the way it handles, the way it drives, EcoSport, just absolutely brilliant. I mean, interiors weren't too great, wasn't too spacious, but really as a driving, it was absolutely amazing. So really, these are some of the cars that stood out. And of course, I have even to say the Ford Mondeo. Not many people will remember the Ford Mondeo, but it was by far the best driving saloon of its time, because the handling was absolutely brilliant. Phenomenal pointy front end, for a front wheel drive car, very little understeer, strong engines, but again, expensive and thoroughly unreliable and not suited for this market. So it was very, very short lived. But I think Ford had learned along the way. And I think even the current Endeavor, a very evolved product, it is, I think it's been a favorite with a lot of people. They haven't been able to sell in the numbers they could have. But again, the Endeavor, a very strong product. So the other another question is, Ford had an image of being expensive to run. Did this image affect Ford, which are otherwise safe and fun cars? So yes, Ford did have this image, and in fairness to the company, they worked really hard at it. And in fact, their service costs really, they did come down. Customers were realizing that, but I think what they couldn't get a handle really was some of their network needed a change. And honestly, that was not completely within Ford's control. So I think they've had a legacy of a weak network right from the days of the Mahindra Ford joint venture, and then again, which carried on after Ford went solo. And they've tried very hard. In fact, at the time of the Figo, they really, kind of worked hard at changing this perception. But again, you're up against companies like Maruti, which really, whatever you say, they just own that space of being a very cheap to own and run. And I think Ford moved away from its real promise, its real character of being fun to drive, and went down this low cost of ownership route, which again, as I said, you're competing with the biggest and most formidable car maker in the world, and it's just best to stay away from them, their turf, whether it's in products, whether it's in perception, or whether in strategy as well. So, Another question is a Ford at heavy discount a good buy? Yes, I think it definitely is, and this question has been asked earlier. I think Ford at a good deal right now. I mean, I would definitely pick one up. If you get something like an EcoSport, that would be really good. I think even the EcoSport diesels are really good because Ford have made some good BS6 diesels, and before diesels fade away, it's a good time to get a diesel. I think even the Endeavors right now, if you can get a good deal on an Endeavor, definitely worth buying. EcoSport as well. So yeah, I mean, Ford products have been good. I've not really been too much of a fan of the Figo because I think the cars have generally been a bit too heavy and and not as let's say exciting as the EcoSport and the bigger Fords. Uh, so I think that's we've got a lot of other questions. Will CBU units of Ford continue in India? Yes, we have said that they definitely will. Will Ford provide warranty? Yes, they will. I don't think they're going to go away from that. Don't forget, Ford is not leaving India, so you can catch them if they don't support your warranty. So I think that's one important point to remember. They will continue here, trying to sell niche products. But I think clearly, it's quite clear that this company is going to be here. That's what they've gone to pains to saying. It's going to be very, very difficult. I think it's really a sad day for the whole auto industry because when a storied legacy manufacturer like Ford leaves India, sometimes you kind of retrospect is this a good thing? One can say that yeah, Ford made a lot of mistakes. They don't know how to operate in India. A lot of Western car makers can't hack the Indian market. They've just not been able to do that. All that is fair enough. But at the same time, the overall environment over here, there are so many barriers which makes it very, very difficult for a lot of makers to kind of make a headway. It is really locked in by a handful of automakers right now. And fundamentally, we've seen these groups. We've got Suzuki, which will be joined by Toyota. Then we've got the Koreans, which is Hyundai, Kia, which is one group. And we've got the Indian OEMs because obviously their survival depends on this market. So you've got Mahindra and Tata, of course, being quite having a strong footprint in here. But other than that, if you look, other than these players, everyone else is very, very marginal. And that's the whole problem because, you've seen this big skew. Most of the big ones taking about 85% of the market and leaving the others to fight for the 15. So it does show that there are some structural issues with the Indian market, which is leading to that. But again, that doesn't take away from the fact that at the end of the day, Ford couldn't quite hack it in the Indian market. I mean, they just, as I said, it was a cultural misfit. They didn't know how to make cars affordable for India, affordable enough. They just didn't have that sense of frugality. And more important, they spent where they shouldn't have spent and cut corners where they shouldn't have cut corners. And I think that's finally the balance that makes the difference between a successful automaker and a not so successful automaker. So I think with that, I will say goodbye. Great talking to you about actually what I think is a pretty sad day to see a company like Ford kind of shut operations in India. And anyway, thanks to all of you all for tuning in and hope I've answered all your questions. Bye. How was it?